in keeping with bridging the gap tradition, you guys know that we have a saying here that we always put God first, and so we're going to start off with a prayer by Ms. Felicia Williams.
Heavenly Father God Almighty, we thank you, Lord God, for this day of coming together, Lord God, to be educated, Lord God, to lift you up in this place. Father, we ask you, Lord God, to come in and just be with us, Lord. We thank you for every speaker that's going to speak and do what you have called them to do. Lord, that we will learn how to touch, move, and inspire. In Jesus' name, amen.
So tonight we're going to present some firearms training to you. But before we get started, there's a couple people that I'd really like to introduce, and that's two members of our city council, Ms. Nikki Hunter and Mr. Raul Gonzalez. Guys, we really appreciate you guys being here. Can't say enough how much it means to have our council come out and support these type of things. And so, our instructors tonight, I'm going to have Sergeant Walsh come up. He's our homicide sergeant. He's also with NEX Metropolitan, one of the supporting or sponsoring agencies tonight. And then we've got Blackout Training Group, Jasmine and Darius. You guys probably know Jasmine. He's one of our in-service instructors at the academy. So Robert, I'm going to turn it over to you, sir, and you guys can get us started.
All right, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
All right, like Chief said, my name is Robert Walsh. I am the homicide sergeant here. I also have a nonprofit, which is NEX Metropolitan, which is a community-based organization based here in Arlington. Our mission, we mentor young men between the ages of 16 and 21. We basically help them to transition from adolescence into young adulthood. We've all been there. We understand that there are hurdles no matter what type of background you come from. We always face some type of adversity. So it's our job, as well as all of our jobs, to kind of help them make that transition. Today, as Chief said, Blackout Training Group is going to take us through some a very informative topic, very informative course, and it hits really dear to me. I think I approached Jasmine in probably December to reach out and educate us on firearms. Of course, believe it or not, all officers are not that efficient with firearms, and I'm one of those guys. So I definitely wanted to reach out to some of the experts to help us out. I noticed, of course, that there's a lot of gun violence, and a lot of that gun violence starts with us, believe it or not. And those guns end up in the hands of our youth. So I wanted to reach out to him, and before we could even piece this class together, something personal happened to me. And I'll introduce a couple of our guests here, and they'll kind of take you guys through the story on why we're exactly here. So, again, if you have questions, I think it'll probably take us about an hour or so, Darius. An hour? 30 minutes. Okay. And then open up to any questions. I promise you these guys can answer those questions. But I'll let them introduce themselves, and then we'll go from there.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
I'm Jasmine. Guys, this is going to be very informal, right? The idea is just that anytime we teach or we instruct, we like to have a conversation with people. So by all means, we're going to go over some information that's on the slide. But at any point in time, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to shoot your hands up into the air. And we have no problem with asking those. But if it's something that's maybe like on a personal note or dealing with a question that you want to know, guys, we will have a question and answer section at the end. But if we have something on the slide, I know my mind is not all that great. So a lot of times I'm like, hey, can I ask a question real quick? And so please feel free to do that. So, but as
one thing I would like to say really quick before we get started, is there anyone who's not a police officer that has a weapon with them right now? Any firearms inside? All right, just to safety is our most important. We want to make sure the only guns that will be out during this presentation are going to be the blue guns that we have here. That Sergeant Walsh has is a blue gun. This is all hard plastic. No other firearms unless exigent circumstances. emergency goes down, these are the only firearms that are permitted to be out and to be handled inside of this room. Does everybody understand? Just trying to make sure, like I said, safety is our number one thing.
So, as Sergeant Walsh said, he contacted me, I guess it was December of last year, and just having the passion for wanting to get information out there. You know, it's oftentimes people have questions regarding firearms, but of course, they might not have a forum or platform to kind of ask those questions, especially in a safe environment where they can't get those questions answered. And the idea is just that people get training to where you respect a firearm is a deadly weapon, no doubt about that. But just like with most things, with proper training and education, you can mitigate a lot of accidents and mistakes and everything like that. So again, he approached me about wanting to kind of put together a class. I reached out to my brother in Blackout Trinity. He'll give you some history on that. That's a company that he started just out of a niche that he saw was there. He just wanted to get information out. He's very knowledgeable and very skilled. And so that's kind of how this course came about. And that's it. So I think it's introduced.
Yeah, so I'll introduce you guys to two of my family members. Mr. Tim, want to come up, and his son Elijah, and they'll kind of set the tone for you guys on the reason why I'm so passionate about gun violence and why it hits so close to home.
Back, I would say January the 5th, that exact day, I received a text from Elijah's girlfriend, and she basically was looking for him, trying to understand where he was at. She told me that she had checked all the jails, all the hospitals, couldn't find him. The last time she spoke to him was Thursday morning, and they were talking on the phone, and he was saying he was going to make a video and call her right back. He never called her back. She drove up to UTA because he was living on campus in the dorm. She checked the jails, she checked the hospitals, no Elijah. So when she reached out to me, I went up there Saturday morning. On my way there, I reached out to Sergeant Walsh because I tried to understand what was the process as far as just trying to locate him, how does it work with missing persons and stuff like that. He explained to me to go to the local police department, put out a missing person report, and because he's an adult, they're not going to contact me, but they'll let him know that, hey, your dad is looking for you, sorry. So, get up there, we talk to the police department, we file a missing person report. They tell me they don't have an officer on hand at the moment, but they can send someone out to do a wellness call. And asked me that I want to wait. I said, well, I head home, could you guys just give me a call with updates? So, about 2 hours later, they reached out to me, let me know that, hey, we went to the front desk at the department on campus. We was able to go to the room, but it looked like it's locked from the inside. Because he's an adult, we can't just reach the door. But like I said, there's someone in there. So at that point, I reached out to a friend of mine. His girlfriend called me back. Her and her grandmother went out there. I went back out there. We spoke with the front desk. They really wasn't too much of a help, but we decided to call the local police back. So at that point, they sent 3 officers out there. We're pretty desperate because we don't know what's going on with him. So I called him back. He kind of talked me down, like, calm down, just try to explain to them what the situation is to see if they'd be willing to breach the door. At that point, they called into the station, got permission. The fire department comes out. At that point, they breached the door, walk in there. All I can hear is, he's in here. So they wouldn't let me in the room. They shielded me from going in. All they was telling me was, he's breathing, his vitals are stable. So at that point, Robert was like, just calm down, let me talk to him. So he talked to the EMT. The guy explained to him what was going on, but he didn't tell me. So the ambulance came. When he walked from in front of the door, I ran in the room. I see him laying on the floor. He really wasn't saying much. They were pulling him out the room. Because the room was pretty dark, all I could just see is blood in the room, black. Put a blanket over him, they wrapped him in a blanket, they put him on a gurney, they walked him out. Then Rob gets back on the phone and say, you know what, you just need to be prepared for what's next. Get to the hospital, they tell me that it was a single gunshot wound to the head. The bullet went in and came out. His frontal lobe is basically destroyed. At this point, there's no bleeding on the brain. They let me see him. When I went back there, he was up, but he was just shaking. I guess because he was cold. For 3 months, he stayed in the hospital. He had about 3 surgeries. They had to reconstruct his forehead. The bullet went in here. It came out the top of his head. He had laid there for over 48 hours. Nobody knew. Didn't hear the gun go off. Didn't know nothing. And I mean, he can kind of tell you what he was doing up until that point. So.
I'm Elijah. Good evening. As my dad said, I was laying there for 2 days and I didn't even understand nothing really. Like I was trying to make a TikTok because that's how I was trying to promote my music. And I was just trying to, promote my music through TikTok, you know what I'm saying? I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't really know, you know what I'm saying, the extent of having a gun and what it can do. And when I was playing with the gun, I was flipping it, trying to look cool, and didn't know that the clip had a bullet in the head. So when I was flipping it, it went off, and I guess, like he said, when it threw him, came out here, and while I was laying there, I couldn't even feel anything. I just remember waking up in the hospital, and I asked my dad what happened. And he was like, yeah, they found him in the bathroom. You was playing with a gun and shot yourself. And I was in a dorm. My roommates was gone for the holidays, and I felt like, you know what I'm saying, this was a good time to do it. So, yeah. I woke up, I felt like cold, you know what I'm saying? Like how my daddy said. And when he came up in the room, I asked him what happened. And he was telling me like, yeah, he was playing with a gun. I could have lost my life. I wasn't even really thinking about it that way. You know? So you just gotta be careful. You know? You don't really know what you can do if you're not paying attention. Just like that.
So, again, you guys have a background on why we're here. And I say that we have to do our part because Elijah was 20, right? He's not old enough to own a firearm. So he got that gun from somebody, right? We're all old enough in here to purchase firearms. So those firearms that we own, we have to do our part in keeping them out of the hands of our kids. And think about if you have a firearm in your possession, in your residence, and you don't know the serial number or where it's actually located inside of the house. If you have young children, even if you don't have any children, there are a lot of people that, as we know as law enforcement, there's a lot of burglaries, a lot of property crimes, a lot of open doors in cars. Chief and I were talking about how people just kind of profile different types of vehicles and just pulling on handles. This is how these kids are getting those firearms. So it's important for us to educate ourselves and be more mindful on how we store our firearms and how we keep them out of the hands of our youth. All right, appreciate it.
If we could jump in a hand. So, starting off, that's the reason why this is close to, not just our heart, but definitely Sergeant Washington. That was kind of the impetus in putting this course together. So yeah, tragically, that's not everyone's not able to say that. Right. So it's just the fact that you are willing to share your story so other people can learn, and just to get their word out there, and I commend you on that, like we're talking about. And so, yeah, so this is a very serious topic. So I just want to, jump to the presentation here. So a little bit about, this is our outline of the agenda here. Again, just talking about who we are and kind of what gives us kind of the opportunity to stand in front of you guys. Again, by no means do we know everything, but we are very knowledgeable, very trained, and we deal with this on a regular basis, right? From not just instructing police officers, but those in the community. Darius does the same. He'll talk about some of his experience as well. We'll talk about some famous kind of incidents involving firearms, because again, these things do happen on a regular basis. And so our goal is to try to minimize that and ultimately reduce that. Talking about background, prevention, statistics, he'll kind of go into that, talk about some recommendations. Definitely hit the firearm safety rules, because that's important. And no matter what context you come across firearms, there are some usual basic rules that everyone must follow. And when those rules are followed, they are intended to stop any casualties from any sort of accident gun issues. So this is not too long ago. This is on call here in Arlington. So I've been with Arlington Police Department since 2008. Only work for Arlington. Currently, I'm assigned as an in-service training coordinator. So what that means is I help develop and teach curriculum for all of the officers after they go through their academy training, go through field training. I help develop curriculum for them, anything from defensive tactics to firearms to classroom. And these are some of my compadres here who I work with. And so again, we take our job very seriously. We see the opportunity to impact the culture and just to make officers enjoy training, to kind of raise their awareness, because we believe that a lot of these things are training issues, right? I mean, a lot of this stuff can be kind of countered with training. You can see some of my experiences there. I've been on the streets a little bit, did street crimes, worked gang enforcement a little while, and I was training officers. And again, currently now, I train them in the incoming capacity.
I'm Darius Williams. I've been a police officer since 2009. My brother had the crazy idea to become a police officer. Nobody understood why he did it. And then he told me, just come ride with me one night. And the rest is history. I was hooked. I came and actually rode out at this station here. And I couldn't believe that they actually paid us to do our job. I would do it for free, but it's all about giving back. So I started a year after he did. I'm currently assigned to the training personnel division at the agency I work with. I do the hiring, background investigations, in-service training, kind of like what he does as well. And I'm also on our SWAT team. I'm a TCO firearms instructor, so I help teach our officers how to shoot, as well as the LTC instructor, and I help teach citizens to get their license to carry, Texas license to carry. Of course, all that other stuff's coming down with constitutional carry, but yet we're still teaching that if anyone is interested, because one of the perks is you get to travel. Other states, they recognize the license, they don't recognize what we do here in Texas. I'm the less lethal and chemical munitions instructor with our agency, so what that means is anytime we have SWAT-related things, flashbangs, 40 millimeter, the baton rounds, less lethal shotgun, gas, anything like that, that's my specialty on the team. And I'm also a Krav Maga defensive tactics instructor. The reason we talk about that, as well as Jasmine is Gracie survival tactics, level 1 and 2 certified. We do offer self-defense classes. Everything's not about firearms. You don't always have a firearm with you, but we teach people the confidence in self-defense. A lot of times we say the time to figure out what you can do is not in the middle of that incident, right? It's before you get there. You train for those scenarios, and that's what we try and do in those self-defense situations. We teach you the techniques to where you're confident. You build your confidence in a controlled environment, so that way when it's time to react, you remember those things that you practice there. That's our motto. When the time comes, we be ready. Situational awareness. We don't pick the time for anything, guys. It's always someone else. What happens when they come to Walmart and go inside and start shooting? We have to react to those different things. So that's our biggest thing. We talk about situational awareness, being ready when those times come.
Where do you teach those classes?
So self-defense classes, we've actually held some private classes because we have some people that are like, hey, I have a group of people. We've gone to people's houses and teaching. We've held them at venues, so it's not one specific location. We don't have our own location, so we typically will travel. But we bring everything to you, the curriculum, the TV, the sound, everything we set up. The pads for everybody to beat up on, and you get to beat us up. So it's a good time. Good time. We don't hit that. But I do have some business cards that I can get out of the car once we get done with our presentation. And like Justin was saying, this is very laid back, very informative. If you guys have questions, we urge you to ask now. This is the safe place. This is the time to ask those questions. It's not when you reacted and did something you thought was authorized and they're walking you out. You're like, well, man, I should have asked that question. That's not the time to ask. Now is the time to ask if you have any questions. Don't feel like, oh, man, this sounds like a dumb question because somebody's going to judge me. Judgment-free zone. Ask the question that you guys have because this is the place to answer. Cool? All right, we'll go ahead and jump in. Okay, so unintentional shootings. Unintentional is a description used in public health for an injury or death that was not caused purposely, in contrast with suicide or homicide, in which there is an intent to cause harm. Unintentional shootings can be self-inflicted or inflicted by someone else and can happen to Americans of all ages. Unintentional injuries and deaths are often called accidents, which can imply that nothing could have been done to stop them from happening. We do not use accidental or accident terminology because gun violence is preventable. That's a very important thing right there. A lot of these things that happen, we're going to talk about the causes, but we don't call them accidental shootings because if someone didn't violate a safety principle with a firearm, or if someone wasn't doing something they're not supposed to, it would not have happened. Accidents are pure accidents. This stuff can all be prevented. We must reduce unintentional gun deaths and injuries by, among other things, educating people about the risks that guns pose in the home, avoiding alcohol and gun use, train on proper firearm use, and advocating for gun storage. All of those things are very, very important, which we'll get into. So, we'll talk about some famous accidental discharges, because guess what? It's not just your everyday 9-to-5 blue-collar worker. It's literally, it happens with everybody. Let's talk about a celebrity. I'm sure you guys probably remember this. Plaxico Burress, former Giants receiver, was partying at a nightclub in 2008 when he accidentally shot himself in the right thigh when a gun slid down the waistband of his pants. First problem, slid down the waistband of his pants. That means he probably didn't have it in a holster, which a lot of people, they don't recognize the dangers. You know, they'll just throw a gun in their waistband and tote it around. That's not the way to carry a gun. But Burress was suspended the last 4 games of the season for conduct detrimental to the team and later spent 20 months behind bars. Eventually, Burress made his way back to the NFL where he had renewed success, although the accidental shooting is surely still the most talked about aspect of Burress' life. You say his name, they're not going to say, oh, he was a great wide receiver for the New York Giants. Everyone's going to say, oh, that's the guy that shot himself. That's how you remember him. You know, that's, if you say his name, they're not going to think about Super Bowls or anything like that. He's going to be forever known as the guy that shot himself in the club. Other people, Al Capone, 12 bodyguards apparently weren't enough to keep the mobster safe from bullets, which ended up being his own. In 1928, Capone accidentally shot himself in both legs and the groin, according to reports at the time. Capone had just finished a round of golf with a friend and was entering the car to head home when his gun discharged accidentally. Same thing. People who don't know enough about guns, they don't know safety rules or principles about the guns, and guns are not toys. They're not for show, you know, they're weapons. They're very dangerous if in the hands of the wrong people. Lil Wayne, when he was just 12 and still known as Dwayne Carter Jr., the boy who would grow up to be a world-famous rapper, nearly bled to death after he accidentally shot himself in the chest while playing with a 9mm handgun. The pistol belonged to a visitor to his childhood home. Carter had the good mind and strength to call 911, and an off-duty officer responded. He kicked the door down and escorted Carter to the hospital. Years later, the officer was eating at a restaurant when he was summoned to come meet a fellow diner who turned out to be Lil Wayne. I almost died, this man saved my life. I'll never forget him, said Lil Wayne. And even in times where the relationship has been rocky between the public and The police department, Lil Wayne stayed this way because he knows that that officer is the one who saved his life. And he's always talked about this. He's been very vocal about this. So those are famous celebrities, but now we'll get into recent discharges. And after I get finished covering these, I'll have Jackson talk about a more recent one that just occurred that you got sentenced. So the top one, a 9-year-old accidentally shoots an 11-year-old to death. Mom was out shopping. That was local. That was in Dallas, just a few months ago. Boy 12 accidentally shot himself with a gun brought by a friend to sleepover, Chula Vista, California. And then another Philadelphia child dies in an accidental shooting. And then we have Elon police officer charged in his child's accidental death. So it doesn't just affect you guys, it affects all of us. It goes police officers, celebrities, civilian, military, it doesn't matter who you are. We have to make sure that we're doing what we need to do. And the sad part about this is, when did I teach that last class? It was July. So a little bit over a month ago, but all these happened 2 weeks before I taught that class. 2 weeks. Then we have at least four children. And even one is too many. We'll talk about that. The fact that one child has to suffer from this is too many people. So we all have to do our part. Jackson will cover the other.
Yeah, and so in February of this year, there was a mother, I can't remember what the jurisdiction was, but she was on a Zoom call, and her young child found an unsecured firearm, and the people on the Zoom call actually watched the young lady get shot by her child. I mean, it's just like that, just tragic. And luckily, the people on the Zoom call called 911, but unfortunately, they were not able to save the mother of 5. And so the thing that we want to highlight here is just that no one is exempt. You know, there are rules in play that we've all got to follow, right? And in doing so, as we said, the goal is to reduce, hopefully eliminate these things that can be avoided. But again, law enforcement is not exempt. Has anyone seen, I believe it was several years ago, there was an off-duty FBI officer who was dancing around in a club. And yeah, you know what I'm talking about? So this guy was dancing around, pretty sure alcohol was involved, and ended up trying to do a backflip. And what happened? The weapon got unsecured, ended up striking someone in the club, or the bar or club. And that officer was found criminally negligent. Now, I can't recall if he ended up serving jail time, but again, if we don't follow these rules, we've got to know, one, what the rules are, and two, follow them to the utmost. It's because only when people start getting lax with the rules, and things tend to happen, right? So again, the goal is to reduce, ultimately eliminate all the tragedies here.
So a little background, in 2019, 486 Americans died from unintentional firearm injuries. That is about 42% of total gun deaths. Like we already said, unintentional prescription use in public health for an injury or death that was not caused purposely, in contrast with suicide or homicide, which they express intent. Unintentional shootings can be self-inflicted or inflicted by someone else. About half of all unintentional gun deaths are caused by another person pulling the trigger. Each year, nearly 500 people die from unintentional firearm injuries, more than one person every single day. The part where it says about half of all unintentional gun deaths are caused by another person pulling the trigger. What will happen is, most times when people pick up a gun, they may not know gun safety, but they know don't point the gun at myself. Most of the times, right? So these other victims are friends. They're siblings. It's, hey, I'm messing with the gun, it goes off, and now this person is a victim. So that's what they're getting at here. Much like other forms of gun violence, unintentional gun deaths are more likely to occur in the United States than in other high-income countries. Americans are 4 times more likely to die from unintentional gun injury than those in comparable countries.
I was just checking out stats today, and it says, you see the 500 people here from unintentional firearm injuries. And they said approximately 100 people every year die from injuries resulting from cleaning a firearm. And so again, we'll talk about the things you can do to mitigate this. But the thing is you never just assume the condition of a weapon. We'll talk about how anytime someone hands you a firearm, like you should not accept that firearm unless it's in a certain condition. right? You can see that there's nothing in the chamber, you can see that there's no magazine in there, because we will say that a loaded firearm, yes, it's definitely deadly, right? But I will tell you that firearms that are unloaded cannot cause injury, unless somebody clubs you, right? You know, but it's designed to fire a projectile, guys, so we want to make sure that we're aware of it.
One of the things that I do when I'm teaching, I'll continue one second. One of the things that I do when I'm teaching, I teach about unloading your firearm. I tell people check, make sure your firearm's unloaded. After you check, what do you think I tell them to do? Check again. And then once you think, hey, okay, it's unloaded, what do you think I tell them to do? Check again. I stress that because I try and let them know, even if you're not familiar with firearms, check, double check, triple check. Make sure, I'd rather you check too many times than not enough times. Because that's where accidents start to happen. Yes, ma'am.
So I have two questions. What are other countries doing that we're not doing? That our statistics are 4 times higher?
Well, one, guns aren't readily available in these other countries just like they are here. I mean, literally, it's not hard to get guns here. But when you think about the things that are being put in place, they only affect law-abiding citizens. When you start putting restrictions, when you start having other things, it's only you guys who are going to follow the rules who it's going to affect. Guns are illegal for certain people. Does it stop? Oh man, I was going to buy that gun, but I can't possess one. It doesn't stop them. They do what they want to do. So they're not readily available in other countries like they are here. I mean, we have so many guns here. And I can't say, you know, how we would go about fixing that. But it's just all we can do is our part in educating people about gun safety. Ultimately, other things like they talk about the homicides and suicides, people who have a gun and have intent, they're going to do what they want to do.
And the other question is, with the gun safety laws that we have in the United States, what is being done about that? So I don't have a gun. I saw somebody get shot before, 2 people, and so therefore I don't want to own a gun. So when people go buy a gun, and I know Texas is a big state that feels like we have the right to own one, and I think you should, but what kind of safety things are taught when people buy their guns, or what are the laws about that?
So when you purchase a gun, they typically will hand you a pamphlet, which no one reads.
Nobody reads it.
I mean, real joke, right? I mean, maybe 1 in 10 people will read it, and that's being generous. But most people will just throw it away. One of the good things about the license to carry course is it's 6 hours of state mandated curriculum where we teach people laws, we teach the responsible mindset, we teach safe storage, we teach all of those things. And I thought that was a great thing because now you have people who are coming to learn the laws, they're learning how to be responsible and how to be safe to carry a firearm. However, the powers that be have said, hey, we're going to go to constitutional carry. So now they're no longer going to require that class when you carry handguns. So I think there are things in place, or there were things in place to try and keep, to promote the safe carrying of firearms. But now it's just up to each other. I mean, each person, each individual. So I would hope now that a lot of other people will be carrying guns, that they would seek this type of training, but it's probably not going to happen, to be honest with you. A lot of people just like the fact that they can tote a gun. The fact that they can carry one. If you ask them when's the last time you went to the gun range to show proficiency, when's the last time you trained, not just went to the gun range, because I'm sure you all have seen on social media the type of videos that are shot at gun ranges. I mean, I can shoot better like this. But it's just a lot of people, they don't want to get better, they just want to be able to carry the gun because they want to protect themselves. But in actuality, they're putting everyone else in danger. So I'll get off my soapbox. I can be on that all day long. But any other questions? Anybody? Thank you for asking that. Like I said, guys, this is very laid back, informal. I want you guys to ask questions if y'all have. So circumstances in which unintentional shootings can happen. One study found that across all ages, the most common circumstances in which unintentional gun deaths occur, 28% were playing with a gun. I commend our young man here for coming forward and actually telling this story, and I'm grateful that he's here to be able to tell that story. And we have to learn from it. We have to learn from it. I think more young people need to hear that story because they don't feel like, oh, it's not gonna be me. Clearly, if he would have thought it would be me, he wouldn't have played with the gun. But a lot of times they don't think about those things. And I'm grateful, like I said, that he's here to be able to tell the story. I heard the story last time that I taught it, but of course it's more powerful coming from the father and the son, hearing it from them. So thank you. I know my brothers already said, thank you for y'all coming forward, but thank y'all once again for coming and being vocal, actually telling the story. Because that's a percentage. Believing that the gun was not loaded. A lot of times, we'll talk about later, a lot of times people think, okay, if I remove the magazine, we call it, some people refer to it as a clip. If I remove the magazine from the firearm, it's no longer loaded. That is not always true. If there's a gun, or excuse me, if there's a bullet in the chamber, that gun can still fire. One time, because there will be one bullet in that chamber, but that's one time is all it takes to take a life. So we have to make sure that we know whether that gun is loaded or unloaded. And then hunting accidents account for 13.8%. The study also found that nearly a quarter of those who died from an unintentional firearm injury and nearly half of all 20 to 29-year-olds who died from unintentional shootings had consumed alcohol. Guys, guns and alcohol, they just do not mix. We should recognize that. One of the things I teach in my license to carry class, if I plan on going anywhere with the sole intention of enjoying myself and having a beverage or drinking, the gun doesn't need to go with me. If I'm going to go have fun, that's cool. If I'm going to stand guard, if I'm going to be the designated driver, if I'm going to watch out for the group of people that I'm with, I'm not drinking alcohol. I'm there responsibly carrying my firearm. And that's something that we have to teach everybody. A lot of times, I'll just have a little drink. I'll just have one beer. That was pretty good. Let me get another one. I'm not going to be, okay, I'll take it. Let's be real. We're human, right? And it starts out as, okay, I'm going to just have this one drink. Oh, that was pretty good. Oh, you got, okay, let me have that. And you can get in trouble for carrying your firearm while intoxicated. That's another story, but we just want to make sure that everybody understands guns, excuse me, guns and alcohol do not mix. Studies show higher rates of household gun ownership and availability of guns are associated with higher rates of unintentional firearm deaths. There's an association between unsafe stored firearms and unintentional gun deaths. One study found that states with higher rates of unsafely stored guns have higher rates of unintentional gun deaths. Just tell you now, New York has a lot less gun deaths than Texas. Why? Because guns are pretty much illegal up there. So those people who have them, it's few and far between. Welcome to Texas. Everybody has a gun in their car. I mean, that's pretty much what we assume having guns down here. So children ages 5 to 14 were more likely to die from unintentional gun injuries if they lived in states where guns were more prevalent, like we talked about. This trend holds for adults too. A 2013 survey found that in New York, 10.3% of the adult population owns guns, while 48.9% of Alabama's adult population owns guns. Alabama's unintentional firearm death is 48 times that of New York's. It's just because there's more guns out here.
You'll find that a lot of times when people are addressing terminology, they talk about children, of course, right? But they also talk about untrained adults being that exact same category. So children and untrained adults, anyone who's not familiar with the handling of a weapon. And I'll tell you guys, like, as a cop, there are times where I will respond to a scene and there's a weapon that needs to be made safe. And I will tell you, if I'm not familiar with handling it, I'm not going to. Because I know I can set that gun pointed in the same direction. And as long as no one is around and we make sure that gun is not going to be touched by anyone, that gun is safe, right? And so get someone who knows what they're doing, right? We have a couple range masters for our department, and there are times, guys, they don't even know how to handle these guns because people can customize them and do all kinds of things to them. So just again, the knowledge is powerful. Again, untrained adults and children, that can go hand in hand. And I'll tell you, it's not just about that because we've had officers who've gotten shot, we've had officers who have had negligent discharges of their firearm, just because again they have not followed those weapon safety rules that we're going to go over here in a little bit. And if you violate those rules, typically if you violate one, it's bad, right? But when people start violating multiple rules, that's when people start getting hurt, right? But always, don't say, oh, okay, I can violate one and I'm good. No, guys, we need to understand the severity of the situation here. So Give him respect he deserves.
Check your ego at the door. There's no room for your ego when we're dealing with these guns. Like Justin was saying, if I handle a gun, it's Grandpappy's 1980 or 1901 revolver or something, and I don't know what I'm not messing with that gun. I'm not gonna sit there and try and figure it out, because that's how accidents happen. Like you said, I'll set it down. I'm not gonna mess with it if I'm not familiar with it. So just check your ego. If you're not, don't go over your friend's house and they're like, oh yeah, I got this gun. Oh yeah, I got a gun too. I know what to do, and then you discharge around. Safer storage of firearms. Evidence shows that parents of adolescents, the most at-risk group in terms of unintentional firearm deaths, were more likely than parents of younger children to keep guns in the home stored unsafely, unloaded, loaded, or both. If a person chooses to store their firearm in the home, it is important to always practice safe firearm storage. For at-home firearm storage, it is widely recommended to store firearms locked and unloaded, store and lock ammunition separately for firearms, and ensure the key or lock combination is inaccessible to children or others who may be at risk for injury. The thing I'm going to say about this is I am real with you guys, right? If the gun is locked away inside of a safe and the kids don't have the combination, does it matter if it's loaded or unloaded? If they can't get to it. I'm going to tell you guys, you make the decision that you want to make, but I personally am not going to have an unloaded gun in my safe, my ammunition down the hallway, because when someone comes and kicks my front door in, I don't have time to go in the safe, ask that guy, hold on 1 second, go down the hallway, go in this closet, grab the ammo, come back over here, grab magazines loaded. I don't have time for that. And so we're being realistic. A lot of my guns are already locked, loaded, ready to go inside the safe. It's a quick press of the buttons, open it up, and then take that gun out. So I'm not going to tell you guys, that sounds like you will not be prepared for an encounter that you may have. You make the decisions that you guys want to do, because ultimately you are responsible for those decisions. But I just want you guys to also have the other end of that. If you want to be prepared when you need to take that gun out, that's not the time to go ahead and load everything up, because we're already behind the curve.
So who has kids in here? Okay. So if you were to take a child and set them down here and place a ball right next to the child, right? And you say, all right, see this ball? I don't want you to touch it. I'm going to walk out this room, but I'm telling you, ball is bad. Do not touch this ball. You got it? What I just said. Do not touch the ball. And they repeat exactly what you said, right? And then you walk out the room. What is that kid's mind thinking?
I'm gonna touch the ball.
You know, like, it might last for like the first maybe 30 seconds to a minute if they're really, really well behaved, right? But their mind starts to play with them and, man, that ball, you know what, I know Daddy told me not to touch that ball, but I just want to see for myself, right? And so I don't know how many times I've seen stories, video, where parents will, I saw a hidden camera show where they had kids and asked parents, hey, we teach our kids about guns and everything else, and they introduced a toy gun into the equation. And the kids were being videotaped, and sure enough, what did every kid do? Almost every kid. They played with that gun as if it was a toy, right? And so the days are long gone where you just tell a kid, hey, don't do this because I said. Like, we've got to give them the tools. Like, this is why I'm saying this. This is how you need to handle this should you find yourself, right? Go get you a trained adult. Do not touch it. Don't allow anyone else to touch it, right? Clear the room. So that's one of the reasons why this course is here, is because, again, if you just expect a kid to police themselves and not do something because you say, then man, that's how tragedies happen, right? So we've got to give them the tools necessary to kind of respond to it.
And a frequent question we'll get is, okay, at what age should people want to allow their kids to start shooting, learning firearm safety and everything? They'll ask, what age should I do that? And it varies. You have some kids who are maybe 10 years old and they're able to stay home for themselves. They know how to care for themselves. They know if there's an emergency. They know how to use the phone that's there, or they know that they need to go next door. And you have some 10-year-olds who I wouldn't trust to do anything, right? So it's just the level of maturity differs. people ask me what age am I going to have my children around firearms, and I don't have a number. It's when they can show me the maturity and I can get behind them and help them to learn safely. Because all it takes is that quick. You give a kid a gun, accidents happen. It was out in New Mexico, I think it was. A little girl was shooting a fully automatic submachine gun. Why? Like, why would you want to do that? She couldn't handle the recoil, rode it all the way back, ended up killing the instructor that was behind. Luckily, didn't kill herself, didn't hurt herself. But it's just, why are we doing it? So just along those lines, there's no specific age. That's something you have to figure out and determine at what age do you think that that child is responsible enough to start learning firearms. Safely storing and reducing access to firearms for the gun owner and other individuals, especially children in the home, is an unintentional injury prevention strategy supported by research, healthcare professionals, and gun owners alike. While there is no safer storage law at the federal level, various safer storage laws exist at the state level. So alcohol and unintentional shootings, guns should never be handled after consuming alcohol and other substances. Alcohol is a risk factor for all forms of gun violence, including unintentional injuries and deaths. Alcohol can impair judgment and lead to violent behavior. Adding firearms to this already dangerous situation can be deadly. Indeed, evidence shows that alcohol use is common in unintentional firearm deaths. A 2019 study found that nearly a quarter of those who died from unintentional firearm injury and nearly half of all 20 to 29-year-olds who died from unintentional shootings had consumed alcohol. Guns and alcohol do not mix. For the oldest age group in the study, adults age 60 or over, alcohol was involved in 11%. So even over 60 years old, a lot of people consume alcohol. So we got to make sure that that's not the time to show your buddy the gun that you just bought last month after you've been throwing a couple back. Let's wait for another day. This is very important as well. Let's talk about dementia and unintentional shootings. Older adults living with dementia or conditions impairing cognition and judgment may be at an increased risk of firearm injury and death. 1/3 of adults 65 and older own guns, and another 12% live in a household with a gun. It is estimated that 60% of people living with dementia live in a household with a gun. So that's more than half of those people. People living with dementia who have a firearm in the home may pose a risk to themselves and others. Dementia may make a person unable to safely handle a firearm and also may result in misperceptions of actual threats. Further, dementia and other diseases could impair logical thinking and emotional control. This is something that a lot of people don't think about. Okay, what about your father, your grandfather, grandmother, mother that's going through dementia? Okay, maybe a few years ago, maybe they're a hunter, they have a bunch of guns there, but okay, maybe we need to start thinking about different things when dementia starts setting in. So this is very important as well. So we don't want the young group getting guns who has no business doing it, but also once that mind starts to go, we don't want other people possessing firearms. Yes, sir.
We took mine from my dad several years ago, who was a lieutenant colonel in the Army, but when his cognitive ability started to just go a little bit, my older brother, my brother-in-law, we took his 2 handguns from him just because he didn't need to have them in the house anymore. So that's a huge point.
Absolutely. And at what point do you make that decision? It can be a tough one.
It's hard.
Especially you talk about lieutenant colonel or in the military period, right? He's a veteran.
And the psychologist too recognized and kind of understood some things going on. So just add all that there to it. But certainly then we're talking about adults in here when we become adults, and if you are gun owners, our kids, your family members are going to come and do that for us. So it's a great point.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. I saw your hand.
Similar to that as well. Mine lives in home. We brought him to live in home with us when we recognized cognitive behaviors, but because there had been a firearm and personal safety threat, we secured the firearm, and unbeknownst to us, until he became aware at a counseling thing, another firearm had been secured. So having a person living with dementia in your home, if you're going out, you have to recognize it, because a veteran as well, you know, he thought he lost his firearm. Somebody stole the firearm. He couldn't remember it. I was like, no. So it's surprising to find how many firearms he was actually, he had purchased after that. And,
So you think you do your part in trying to keep everybody safe, but it's the dimension, it's not the person, right? The mind goes and it's like, man, you can't find, I don't know where the gun is. I mean, of course I need to go buy another one. So they go buy another one. And then maybe they forgot they even bought that gun. Like, I can't find this one, I need to go buy another one. But that's tough to recognize that and be able to say, a lot of times people will talk about the driver's license, like, whoa, you're not safe driving. You know, we need to get the medical board and get your driver's license revoked, but let's talk about firearms, just like you said. And then for them to come live with you, you have to now secure your firearms and do everything that you can do to make sure that, to prevent unintended access. So thank you for sharing that, both of you guys.
And I was gonna say, we're talking about, introducing substances, alcohol, anything else. And I'll tell you guys, has anyone ever been extremely tired? Anyone ever driven extremely tired before? And sometimes you're like, woof, geez, let me pull over. Windows down, music up, the whole nine, guys. So I will tell you that just operating when you don't have all of your full mind present, right? So, there's, you listen to the example of, someone kicks your door in the middle of the night, you awake from a dead sleep. Man, you've got to be extremely careful about how you operate that if you're not fully awake. Because, things like target identification, target recognition, focus, accuracy, fine motor skills, all that stuff deteriorates in a stressful situation. So while someone may say, hey, you know what, I'm not operating firearms, whenever I have a beverage or something like that. But just don't forget that being not fully being awake and not being fully alert, sometimes that can be almost as dangerous as being intoxicated to a certain degree. Right? And again, we're not standing up here trying to say, hey, shame on you. We're just trying to bring about the awareness, just so we can have a conversation, because the last thing we want anyone to do is to make a mistake, right? And be attraction.
So just as family members may consult with older relatives, physicians about concerns, their ability to drive or live alone, family members may also express concerns about their relatives' ability to use a firearm. The Alzheimer's Association recommends removing firearms from the home of someone living with dementia to prevent unintentional shootings, recognizing that storing or locking up a firearm may not be enough. Extreme risk laws may be appropriate mechanisms for removing firearms from an individual living with dementia. This tool has the potential to prevent all forms of gun violence, including shootings. So annually, more than 27,000 individuals are admitted to the emergency department for unintentional firearm injuries. So we talked about the deaths, right? Around 500 deaths. But let's talk about the injuries alone. 27,000, more than 27,000 individuals. So luckily, there aren't more deaths. But that's a staggering amount of injuries. The vast majority of these individuals, more than 26,000, do not succumb to their injuries and die. In fact, unintentional firearm injuries account for 37% of all non-fatal firearm injuries, but less than 2% of all gun deaths. The lethality of unintentional firearm injuries is it's far less than any other type of gun violence, according to the nationwide emergency department sample, or NEX and CDC data. 2 out of every 100 unintentional firearm injuries are fatal. Although there is still far too many unintentional firearm deaths, the number of unintentional firearm deaths has decreased over the past 2 decades. In the first decade of the 21st century, there were 691 annual unintentional firearm deaths. In contrast, the second decade, there were 512 unintentional firearm deaths, a 35% decrease. So we talk about almost 500, that's almost 700 firearm deaths. Similarly, the number of unintentional firearm deaths among children and teens, 0 to 19, dropped by 23%, from an average of 154 annually from 2000 to 2009 to 118 annually between 2010 and 2019. The expansion of interventions to improve safer firearm storage and handling practices may contribute to further decreases in unintentional firearm deaths in years to come. So more people were buying safes and being safe, whether it's a gun lock. I understand some people may not have a gun safe at home, but even a cable lock. I think they were passing them out when people came in. If you need one, get one. They work. You thread it through the barrel, through the hand grip, and connect it. No rounds can be loaded inside of that gun. That's good enough. If you don't have the means to go buy a huge safe, that's totally fine. And all guns come with some sort of lock, just like that.
Yeah, now if you buy a firearm, guys, a lock comes with it, right? Just because of,
Child safety lock, 2004.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, and we were talking about, I mean, unless that gun is not able to be fired, and sometimes people think that, oh, you know what, I have kids in the house, so I'll just place the gun out of their reach. Guys, that's not considered safe storage. You know, it's for no one who's not supposed to confine that gun. So I'll tell you, regardless, I have a 15-month-old as of today, and I'm learning, man, kids can be incredibly creative and determined. So, you know, child-proofing and everything else, I gotta step my game up, right? So again, just the only way is just to not cut corners.
So looking at the numbers, we already went over it. You see how it's a high spike in 2000, 2001, almost 800. And it kind of went down. 2006, I don't know what happened there, but we went right back up. And we started to kind of taper down. But like I said, even one of those is too many. So we all have to do our part. Disparities across demographics, across all ages, races, and ethnicities. Males die from unintentional shootings more than females. I will say, I've said it the last time, guys, we know that women are way smarter than us. Just tell some of the stories of the things that you have done, and people will be surprised. My mom is actually in here. Our mother is in here. And when she hears some of the things that we did when she wasn't home, she just like,
Grace of God.
she's like, really? I can tell y'all about the time I set the stairs on fire, the time he locked me out, so I decided I was gonna be smart and kick through the plate glass. It's just the dumb stuff that the males do. So, ladies are way smarter than we are, and this goes to prove. The numbers back. Excuse me.
So just saying, it does not matter, guys. Like when we're saying by sets, like I said, generally more males will die from an unintentional shooting than females. So you guys can read the stats there. Things, what can we do? What can we do to stop this? Because as we said, one person is too much. And we have a lot more than one happening on an annual basis in this country.
I think we need to train our children at a younger age because with parents, a lot of times when you're having little boys, the first thing you get them is a gun, a toy gun, a car, and not realizing that those are all machines. And so they grow up, become a teenager, you forget about training them and teaching them the safety of, cars and also guns. And they grow up still having that mentality that, okay, this is a toy. I want this. It's fun. And the first three letters in federal is fun. And a lot of times we forget about that. So I think we need to train them and teach them a little earlier.
So it's perfect timing too, because to your point, among males, black men ages 20 to 34 are at the highest risk of dying from unintentional shootings. And then among females, black females ages 0 to 19 are at the highest risk of dying from unintentional shootings. I will say something as far as when they talk about black. Growing up, I can say that me and my friends typically did not have firearms. Our parents really didn't say they had firearms, but I'm not being funny. But my white counterparts, they had rifles when we were like in the 5th grade. They went hunting. They knew gun education. And like you said, I think we all have to do a better part teaching our kids. I'm not saying, hey, your kid's 6, let's go to the gun range and teach them how to shoot. But it's information. We just don't have that. So not only just saying, hey, guns are bad, don't touch guns, guns aren't good. Okay, hey, this is why guns are bad, because a bullet can come out and it can strike someone. So you shouldn't be touching the gun. If you want to show your kids the guns, if you want to break it down and show them unloaded guns and go through it, to each their own. But it's the information. It's actually teaching. Because I literally knew absolutely nothing about a gun until I became 21, well 18, because I bought a shotgun at 18. Had no clue what I was doing, luckily never, I was safe about it, or I thought I was safe, let's put it that way, because a lot of people think they are safe. But then I became 21, I bought a Glock, and I carried it with me in my car because the law says I could. Ask me how many times I went to the gun range to shoot and actually learn what I was doing. No, I didn't. And then I became a police officer and realized the importance of proficiency and training, and that's when I started to get serious about it. But there's a lot of people who just, they don't recognize the importance of training like that. So by sex, the vast majority of victims in unintentional shootings are male. In 2019, 90% of unintentional gun death victims were male. That's high. For both self-inflicted and other inflicted unintentional gun deaths, the lowest percentage of male victims occurs in the youngest age group, those 0 to 9 years old. So, remember, girls, yes, ma'am.
I have a little story. I didn't know about guns either, and my grandmother had a gun, and she didn't even tell us that she had a gun. So we were sitting on a sofa, and my brother, who's younger than me by 1 year, he's in a drawer looking for something, and we hear this pow, and we're like, "What was that?" It sounded like a balloon. Well, he was reaching in the drawer, and he touched the gun went off, and it grazed his thumb. But we were all lined up on the sofa. He could have easily pointed the gun and got all of us, and we didn't even know she owned a gun.
Right. And that's safe storage. That it all comes down to safe storage, just making sure you prevent unintentional access. And we all have to do our part for our own firearms. Jackson talked about that ball on the ground, right? But I can give you all actual scenario. So we're at my aunt's house. And I don't know if my mom knows this, but she knows it today, right? So, we're at my aunt's house, and my uncle has a knife. And it's a pocket knife, it's brown and gold, and he tells us, don't mess with my knife, don't touch my knife, right? But ladies are smarter than men, and we want to touch the knife, so he decides to leave. Sure enough, we go in his room, we open up the knife, and we're looking at it, we're like, oh man, this is cool. All right, cool, let's put it back. We're trying to close it. We don't know how to close it, because we shouldn't be messing with it in the first place. We had no clue how to close that blade. So long story short, we got our butts when we got home. But we learned not to touch the stuff. But it's just that curiosity. We wanted to touch that knife, we wanted to play with the knife, and then we got the opportunity to get it. Luckily, it wasn't a gun where something bad could happen. So this is just a percentage, and we already talked about that's a high rate there. So by race, ethnicity, and age, half, 52% of unintentional firearm deaths occur under the age of 35. Nearly 1/4 of all unintentional firearm descendants are 0 to 19 years old, and 28% of all unintentional firearm descendants are 20 to 34. So one study found that victims were more likely to be unintentionally shot by someone else the younger they were. That's that brother that goes into dad's room to see what his brother's doing, and then things happen. So that's what we have to watch out for. Over 3/4 of unintentional firearm deaths for children 0 to 14 were caused by someone else, while the majority of unintentional shootings among older Americans were self-inflicted. It's important to note that when looking at unintentional gun deaths for both males and females by age, race, and ethnicity, the subgroups have few deaths as a result. Much of the data is unreliable or suppressed. Black males ages 20 to 34 are at highest risk. Kind of like our young man was saying here, it's the coolness, the cool factor, right? Okay, messing with guns. A lot of times when I see these videos, I can tell you, I cannot think offhand of one time I've seen a female with the gun doing things or shooting a video with a gun. It's always the males that are doing that type of thing. For females, black youth ages 0 to 19 are at highest risk. Though the rates for all races and ethnicities for women are small, rates of unintentional gun deaths for white women are similar across most of the lifespan.
So what do you guys think people are getting the idea of how to handle, or where do you think people are viewing others handle firearms? Where are they seeing? Videos, TV shows, games, right? And so we've got to show them the right way. Because the thing is they're getting educated. I think we talked about this on a different topic. Kids are, and even untrained people are getting the education. It just may not be correct, right? And so I remember at a very young age, my mother tells me we have guns in our home. But I mean, even something as simple as playing with, and we thought she was over, being kind of a little ridiculous when we were younger, but hey, what's it, like bubble gun or like a cap gun, this is a toy. She's like, you don't point that at it. Right. And we were taught that at a very, very young age. you know? And so when you talk about, you know, kids getting harmed by someone else, that's where a lot of this stuff comes from, right? Some of this, they're pointing at this and they're seeing others who handle and manipulate these weapons in an unsafe manner, and they copy that, and that's where they try to happen.
So enact and implement programs and practices that promote safer firearm storage, easy access to firearms, particularly unsecured firearms, and the presence of firearms in risky situations, increase risk of unintentional injury and death. Mitigating access with safer storage practices and through evidence-based policy prevents unintentional gun violence. Shifting behaviors related to firearm storage and handling practices may contribute to further decreases in unintentional firearm deaths in years to come. So just doing our part, securing them the way that they need to be secured. So the recommendations, their recommendation is safely storing and thereby reducing access to firearms and unintentional injury prevention. Strategies supported by researchers, healthcare programs, and gun owners alike. For at-home firearm storage, firearms should be stored locked and unloaded. We already went over that. Ammunition stored separately. And the key combination should not be accessible for children or adolescents. Storing firearms outside of the house is the safest option. Yes, it is. It is. But if something happens, why do we have firearms? Most of us that have them in your home. Why? What is the purpose? To protect yourself. It does you no good if you're going to go hide it in the backyard, 6 feet down, and somebody kicks in your door. It does you absolutely no good. So just recognize that. Safety technologies, technological solutions have the potential to reduce firearm safety or injury. We encourage development and evaluation of technical solutions to improve safety. Lethal means safety counseling, they actually offer this. Lethal means safety counseling is an evidence-based healthcare intervention that is effective in preventing unintentional firearm injuries and deaths. The counseling helps provide, or the counseling provider work collaboratively with gun-owning patients and their families to reduce injury by safer storage practices. Healthcare professionals should be trained on lethal means safety counseling, and all patients and parents of pediatric patients should be asked about firearm access and safer storage. Patients at elevated risk of unintentional injury, such as individuals with dementia or conditions like we talked about, should receive more in-depth lethal means counseling. Extreme risk laws, we kind of covered that. Extreme risk empower law enforcement and the people closest to an individual at an elevated risk of harm to self or others to intervene to help prevent gun tragedy before they occur. These state laws allow law enforcement and in some states family and household members, among others, to petition a judge to temporarily limit an individual's access to firearms if they are at elevated risk. Extreme risk laws may be an appropriate mechanism, kind of like what we were talking about. If they're not willing to give up that gun, and you recognize, hey, things aren't right, and they probably shouldn't be owning a firearm, this is an avenue that you can go. And also, we talked about avoiding alcohol and other substances when accessing guns. They do not mix, right? So, let's talk about some firearm safety principles. We have a bucket of blue guns up here that we're going to pass a few around. You guys can feel free to manipulate them. Like I said, these are all molded pieces of plastic, okay? It's not a firearm. It's not a fully functioning firearm. But one of the things that you will notice is while I'm standing up here and I have this one in my hand, you guys come out, I always stand, I have my hand like this at all times when I'm holding this gun, okay? If I need to engage a target, it's switched. I'm not pointing it at Sergeant Walsh, I'm pointing it at the wall, okay? But it switches when I decide I need to fire, okay? But anytime I handle this firearm, you will see that my finger is what we call index, what we'll get to here in a second. But this is a piece of plastic. Can this shoot someone? How do you see me hold this? Does anybody see me doing this? No, okay? We treat these just like we would treat an actual gun. So it starts with safe behavior, okay? I will never point this at myself, and I will not point this at anyone else that I'm not willing to destroy, all right? So I'll step over here so I'm out of the light. But at all times that I hold this gun, I will never sweep you guys. We always say, hey, think of there's a laser coming out of the end of this barrel, and anything you go across will cut it in half. So I want to make sure I'm not pointing this gun. One way that you'll see a lot of people standing is just like this. It's not pointing back at me, but it's just down in a safer direction. So this is a safe way to hold the firearm. Notice how my finger is shooting.
So they say always keep the handgun pointed in a safe direction. So generally, pointing this down at the ground is pretty safe, right? If my foot's in the way or there's someone who's below my position, same thing, guys, if I'm pointing up in the air, right? Let's say if I'm in the first story floor on a 2-story house, is that pointing up in the air a safe direction? So it always requires you to keep your mind engaged. Let's check.
One of the things I was just gonna say, when you were holding that up like that, yes, you're kind of in the dark, you can't tell if that's a real weapon or not.
Yes, sir.
So that's, you know.
So that brings up the whole debate about airsoft, right? If I just quickly do this at an officer, I see a gun. Okay, hey, you should have seen that orange. Okay, how am I gonna see orange? I saw a gun come up towards me like this. So even like you said, if I'm doing this, if you can't see that, I mean, it's just no way to know. But my whole point is we always treat these just like they're firearms, okay? This is where it starts. So, I'm sorry, we went over it, but always keep the handgun pointed in a safe direction, like Jackson said. Never point a handgun at anything you are not willing to destroy. So do we point them at the wall, playing around? No, okay, good. We don't play with these are not toys. Always keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to shoot. We call this the index position. So this is index. If you attend a gun training with us, like if you hear me say straight finger, this is what I'm talking about. So not this way, because this is how bad things can happen. All right? Just like if you're walking around your house, you should, kind of like Jackson was saying, if I hear something that is happening, I had something fall and it broke glass like at 3 in the morning. Of course, I'm like, oh my God. I grab the gun from under my bed, I start to go, and I turn on the light that's on my gun, and just with me having my night vision, and it bounced off the wall, I'm like, ah. So it's adjusting to everything, okay? But you have to make sure that as you're moving down the hallway, what if one of my kids would have came out and said, what was that? You know, if you're walking around like this with your finger on the trigger, and you turn and someone spooks you, bad things can happen if you jump, okay? That's why we teach index. If I jump like this, you know, my finger's along the frame, I'm not pulling the trigger. So anytime you're handling this gun or a gun, you should make sure that your finger is indexed.
Yeah, so what that is, guys, indexing is basically your trigger finger, so your index finger lays along the side of the firearm, right? It's not inside the trigger guard. This is what we call the trigger guard because it guards the trigger. This is the actual trigger that gets pulled to facilitate the firing of the projectile. So if you're a left-handed shooter, again, fingers along the side. If you're a right-handed shooter, finger along the side. So that's just basic terminology. One of the things we look for in new shooters is, I don't know how many times when they get the firearm, the finger intentionally gravitates inside that trigger guard. And we'll always straight finger, straight finger, straight finger. Because unless this is your natural go-to, anything outside of it, guys, is a liability, something can happen. Okay, so always, 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 straight finger until you decide to shoot, and then you shoot, and then once you decide you no longer shoot, what does the finger do? Goes back straight finger, guys. So that's how we deal with that. So that's why you're always training your brain. Straight finger, decide to shoot, I pull, and then when I'm not pulling the trigger, it's always straight. So that needs to be your default.
So luckily we have a bunch of blue guns in here, so I want everyone who has a blue gun to go ahead and grab that blue gun. And I want to see everybody index. Index. So just turn the top of your hand towards me just so I can see that we're all indexed. We got some Charlie's Angels around here? All right, both. Yeah, I'm both. But just, this is index, okay? That's all it is, just making sure. Because if you jump, if you turn a corner, and maybe you weren't expecting someone that lives there to come out because they heard the noise too. If you're walking around like this and you jump, that is okay. Okay? If you're walking around like this and you jump, bad things can happen. And we don't have time for oops because we can't get that around that. Okay? Straight finger. Straight finger. Thank you. You can set the guns down. So, another handgun safety rule is to know your target, your backstop, and what is beyond the backstop. This is very important when we talk about carrying a gun responsibly. Because if Justin, can you stand here for me? If for some reason Justin posed a threat to me and I need to engage him or shoot him, If I do this number and I'm not good, is this a problem? What's behind Justin? Someone who has nothing to do with this, right? This is a problem, but that's something that people won't recognize if they've never been taught it. If this person has a knife or something, yeah, I may need to shoot him, but does she deserve to get shot as well? Not at all. So that's something that we have to think about, and it starts at the gun range. Know the target, the backstop, and what is beyond it. These are our targets. The backstop is what is behind the targets, okay? But also we need to think about what is in between us and that target. If Jackson were to go to the other side and he decides to, maybe he starts shooting, I cannot shoot him. I should have the mind, I should know that I can't shoot him. But you would be surprised how many people would sit here and try and take care of this situation. And that's scary, especially people who have no training. I'd be kind of hesitant to let some officers take that shot. Let alone someone who bought a Glock, 13 months ago and has like 6 rounds in the magazine, never shot it before. So that can be a problem. We want to know our target, the backstop, and what is beyond the backstop, but also what's between us and that target. So in this situation, is the backstop clear? Yes, right? Because that's what you're going to see in a shooting range. All right? There's another picture on here where there's a guy with a knife and there's a huge crowd behind him. That's a problem. I probably don't want to get stabbed, so I may have to shoot this person, but how often do you train? Are you willing to bet that you are going to be accurate in this stressful situation? Shoot this person who's probably moving and there's a crowd behind him. That's why we teach the importance of training.
And so talking about this, guys, this is where you get into the action. Because if I don't have to think, okay, this is how I operate if I have a real gun, and this is how I operate whenever I have a toy gun, if I'm consistent, regardless of what type of weapon this is, real or fake or whatever, that's how you put these good practices into play, right? The more you practice, like you play. Just be sure the gun is safe to operate. Again, we talked a little bit about knowing how to use the gun. If you don't know how this gun operates, what's our course of action? Don't touch it. I mean, it's literally that simple, right? I think I might have seen one of these before. No, if you do not know, there's no harm, no foul. Leave it alone. It's not worth the risk. Talking about using correct ammunition, guys, there are a ton of different types of ammunition, even people that make their own, right? All I'm going to say about that is to make sure that you are using the correct type of ammunition. Right? Ammunition is designed for a lot of different situations, so just make sure that you're aware of that. Talk about anytime you're training, proper eye and ear protection, guys. I can't put that out. There are officers who have had careers who have had issues with not, now we're kind of educated to know how our hearing is impacted, right? The need to wear anti-rated hearing that goes over the ear, because that can be detrimental over a long-term exposure. But we want to have that longevity. Anyone ever been to a gun range before?
Yeah.
Do they seem to play around with, or in most cases they play around with following these weapon safety rules?
They won't play, they're very strict. They're not, when it comes to handling the weapon, to aiming safely, they will kick you out.
Yes, they will kick you out.
Yes.
And you will not return your
And you will not return. Because you are a liability to everyone around you if you do not follow those rules. I will tell you again, kind of going back to treat every gun as if it were loaded. Guys, again, we talked about, there's no way that if I were to pull this trigger, this weapon, this here is going to fire a bullet. But I don't care, guys. I'm still going to treat this the exact same way I would treat a live firearm. And again, so that's how we handle this. Do you have anything about passing a firearm to?
Not in this presentation, you can cover it.
So I will tell you guys that, like I said, this weapon, if this were a real gun, because this slide is forward, you can't see if there's a round in the chamber. Because you see that there's a magazine that facilitates the feeding of ammunition into that firearm, this weapon is considered loaded. The only way that I would accept this firearm, and anyone should ever accept the firearm, is with the magazine removed, and you can visually inspect the chamber and make sure that there's nothing in it. That's the only way someone should ever hand me a firearm. I've been around experienced shooters, and they try to pass me a weapon like this. I will see them pull the magazine out and then drop the slide forward, and they're going to pass me this, and I'm like, no, will not accept that. And I've even had people get mad at me, officers get mad at me, like I insulted their sensibilities. But if your sensibilities get insulted over the risk of what could happen fatally, I'll take that all day long. Right? So those are just some minor things about kind of weapons and everything, especially like passing back and forth. People always do that, right? Always, always, always. So that's just a little bit, just kind of on the weapon safety rules. But you will see some variation of this, some, and to go into greater extent, but you will mainly see treat all weapons if they're loaded. Keep your finger off the trigger and out of the trigger guard until you made a conscious decision to shoot. Be conscious of your target and your environment, and know where a round will go. Right? And again, as long as you follow those, because we're safe. Okay? And so that's the goal of this.
And then lastly, only use a handgun that you're capable of shooting safely. A lot of times we see videos on YouTube, of course, where they set people up. Female shooting a Desert Eagle handgun, and they're like, "Hey, shoot this, shoot this." It's not. That's not a joke, right? It's a firearm. People can get seriously hurt or killed messing with this. So we got to make sure that we're not trying to set people up. Also, what are we trying to do when we shoot guns? We're trying to learn. We're trying to become proficient. You can actually ruin someone's time ever wanting to shoot a gun by doing something like that. You give them this huge gun that's going to recoil so bad and it comes back and hits them in the head. You think they're ever going to want to go back to the gun range to shoot, to learn? No. So we got to make sure we're not playing those games. So does anyone have any questions? We said we wanted to open it up to you guys. Please, 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 if you have questions, like we said, this is the place, this is the time to ask those questions. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you said use correct ammunition. So if you have a handgun, you can interchange ammunition?
So depending on the caliber of the handgun, yes, ma'am, you can. If you're, what they're pretty much talking about is 9mm, not trying to load 9mm in a 40 caliber weapon, or 380 and 9mm. So just recognizing the type of ammunition. A lot of times people will say, they won't even tell you they have a Glock 17. They say I have a 9mm. That's all they know. So as long as you have that 9mm, if you have a Glock 9mm, if you have a Smith & Wesson 9mm, if you have a SIG 9mm, you can still run 9mm in all of those guns as long as the caliber is the same, you're fine. So that's what we're talking about, making sure you have the correct ammunition. Anyone else? Any other questions?
You know, if you have one of those older guns, you know, the revolving type.
Yes, ma'am.
You know, when you look at them, you see you can tell when the bullets are in there.
Yes, ma'am.
You know, with this being a little different, this gun being different, I know you have to push this thing up in there like that.
Yes, ma'am.
But with the revolver thing, how do you know how to take the bullets out?
So with the revolver, there's a button to press on the side that will release what we call the cylinder. That's where you put the bullets in. And once you press that, the cylinder will come out, and then you can see all the back, the primers. So you can't see if there's a bullet attached to it, but a lot of times you'll see a mark in the middle of what we call the primer. So on the back of the bullet, imagine just a dot being on the back of that bullet. That's showing that the firing pin struck that one and shot. I would say, make sure, obviously I would take those out to inspect them, but yes, ma'am, you would press the side button, which will release the cylinder, and then you can press the plunger, and all the shell casings can fall to the ground. Any other questions?
How do you make sure that the chamber is clear?
So, on this type of gun, you would remove the first step is removing the magazine, right? Because it doesn't matter if the chamber is empty. If I pull what we call the slide, the top of the gun, if I pull that back, it's going to chamber around and it goes back forward. So we want to move the magazine, and then from there, we can pull all the way back on the slide and lock it to the rear, which is what Cassie was talking about, the safe way to hand someone a firearm. And then you can see inside the chamber. You can see through the top of the gun that there's nothing in the magazine well, and then that there's nothing in the chamber. So that's how you would be able to inspect. So if you see this gun sitting down, and for whatever reason you have to pick it up, it's the firearm safety rules. It's not grabbing this gun like this. That's not how you pick it up. A lot of people think it is, okay? It's grabbing that gun the right way, removing the magazine, learning how to do that, locking into the rear. One of the things that we teach is an introduction to handgun classes. We realize that everyone doesn't have the history of firearms and know how to even. We have to start at the beginning of that lesson with, okay, this is a gun, all right? So this is your magazine, these are the bullets go inside of the magazine. We teach you how to load the magazine. We teach you how to insert the magazine inside the gun, teach you how to remove it, get you familiar with the firearm and how it works. So we break it down. If someone kind of knows how that works, then we can kind of get past it, but we can't assume. When you assume, that's how bad things can happen. So we break it down from a person who, I've had someone who's never touched a gun before, and he went through the class, he did the introduction to firearm, an hour of handgun lessons. It was funny, you know, before I told him to pick up the gun because I wanted him to see the progress. So at first he picked up the gun and he was just like this, and I told him to shoot, and he was kind of on this number, and he was like, oh man. And I was like, okay, that's cool. And then we just went through our lesson, but by the end of the lesson, it was proper safety fundamentals. You know, he would grab the gun, he would go ahead and load the gun, come over the top, and it looked like he'd been shooting his whole life. But it's just about learning the right way and then repeating that. So any other questions, firearm related? We just want you guys to be safe. That's it. And we all have to do our part. And if you have family members that have guns, we got to make sure that they're doing their part as well.
And I'll tell you guys, I know that this is a very quick rundown. By no means do we expect to give you this, 30, 45-minute course of now, hey, you're good and golden. But we want to give you some things to be mindful of, right? And like Derek said, the consistent application of those principles will allow you to be safe all the time. So that's something I did want to list. There are a lot of good resources out there, guys, that can kind of, I came across one on this website. So it's called Project Child Safe, and it's the projectchildsafe.org. So project, just like it says, PROJECT, child, CHILD, safe, SAFE.org. They have a lot of good information. They talk about whether you gun locks or how about safe storage for weapons. Again, they're really good about just putting information out there. So again, if you want to peruse that, you're more than capable. DPS,
Could you say that again?
it's projectchildsafe.org. That's a good resource. Another thing is, so Derek mentioned that as of September 1st, or effective September 1st, in Texas will now be constitutional carry. So what that means is you will no longer have to go through a course and have a license to carry a firearm. Okay? I'll tell you guys, I'm kind of worried about it. And I'm worried just because I don't want people who are not familiar with handguns or with weapons, period, operating, right? There's no longer that you have to go and take that course. And so, anyways, the reason why I said that part of the legislation was DPS, so the Department of Public Safety, on their website, they have a weapons safety course as well, right? And so you can literally Google or whatever your search engine is, DPS gun safety course, and you can have access to that PowerPoint presentation. Part of the constitutional carry requirements was they had to make that information available to anyone. So I highly recommend going there and again looking at that information just as a refresher, right? Just understanding what you need to do. Again, but following those weapon safety rules, guys, that's a must. That's a must. That's a must. And so one of the things, kind of in closing, really quickly, that I love about Bridging the Gap is, we all see that there are problems out there, right? But, the question is, as Lisa often says, hey, are you going to keep talking or are you going to start walking, right? And so the idea is just that figure out what you can do to address this issue, right? Maybe that's for you going and getting some training and getting more familiar with firearms. Maybe that's you sharing information with someone who's got kids about, hey, or having a conversation of, man, you know what? I attended a presentation the other day, and I know that you have kids and you're concerned about, hey, how do you, secure your weapons, right? Just a conversation. So I think if we leave this space, like, pledging to do what we can to make to address this issue. I think that's how we're going to kind of minimize and reducing the tragedies. And hopefully one day we can eliminate it, right? That's the goal.
So we want to say congrats. Thank you for taking the time to learn how to be responsible with firearms. This is just one of the many classes offered by Blackout Training Group, and we hope to train with all of you guys. Truly, thank you for allowing us the opportunity to talk to you guys about this. Like Jackson was saying, it's very important, and we all just have to do our part. So thank you all for the opportunity. Thank you. Next.
Yeah, so real quick, I was just talking with this, so, there are some laws about, what's making a firearm accessible to a minor, just things like that, the penal code that Texas has. But again, the idea, guys, that it's everyone's responsibility, right, to have safe practice when it deals with firearms. So I think that's what kind of just want to touch on that. So we'll stick around here afterwards. If anyone has any questions, like I said, Garrison, you have some cards that you could, somebody's interested. You can grab some of those. But again, guys, the idea is just that we start to eliminate this stigma. Right now, we can't talk about it. It's, hey, what are we going to do to address this issue? Proper training, safe weapons handling. That's how we can reduce these tragedies.
So I just want to tell you guys, it was a great job. I've known Justin for a long time, and I got to meet Darius tonight. I'm going to tell you, Mrs. Williams, job well done. This doesn't just happen. To produce two young men like this, and I know that your parents and skills have had a lot to do with that. One thing that I just want, and we're going to be quick here because I know it's a little over time, but all those deaths that they talk about, I want you to think too about secondary victimization. So if you're a kid and you shoot your brother, yeah, your brother's dead, but how's your life going to be for the rest of life? And how are your parents going to feel because of the guilt that they're carrying around that it happened? So it's a very, very serious thing. One of the things that I love about working for Arlington is I get to work with guys like these, our training staff back here, our chaplain, Sergeant Walsh, our media guys here, all top quality people. And then I look around and I see some people that are constantly here every time we have a bridging gap meeting. And we cannot do this alone. We have got to, Felicia spoke this morning at a conference, and the message was really clear. It's not we and us, or it's not we and you. It's just we. We're on the same team, and so we need to break down those barriers and just work together. So I appreciate everybody for being here tonight. One thing I want to say, I don't want to embarrass you, Robert. I just want to talk about the quality of our employees. Robert's going to get an award this week. We're going to get to go watch him. It's the Arlington Alliance for Youth Award, and it's because of his work at NEX Metropolitan and what they do for our youth in the city. And so congratulations, Robert. Felicia, do you have anything?
I do not. I just want to thank everyone that came out. I know I just mentioned you, Veronica, at the conference today. Thank you so much for showing up, coming out. Miss Mary, thank you so much for coming out. And everyone that came out to support Virginia. And you all, the William brothers, y'all my brothers. Thank you all for doing such an excellent job.
So real quick, 2 weeks will fall on Labor Day, so we will probably do the third week. I'm guessing Labor Day would be a bad day for most people. Which will put us back on the second and fourth Monday of each month anyway. Thank you guys for coming. If y'all have any questions, we've got several staff members around here. Felicia's here. If you don't know what to do to get involved in the community, just ask her. She'll give you something.
So you guys go around and we'll collect these.